So human trafficking is on the rise in South Africa. On the weekend, police rescued about 90 undocumented Ethiopian nationals from a human trafficking syndicate in Sunnydale Ridge, Johannesburg. But just how widespread is the problem? Well, to help us answer that question, we are joined by Emma van der Walt, who's the CEO and founder of A Brave to Love, which is a counter-human trafficking organization. She's here to shed light on the human trafficking scourge in our country. Emma, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. We've been playing a few clips from Atlenda Mate of the SAPS, a spokesperson, of course, and one of the things that she said is this particular finding over the weekend is one of quite a few, right? A few incidents where Ethiopian nationals have been found within our borders. Talk to me about your initial reaction seeing this story of the 90 Ethiopian nationals found in Johannesburg over the weekend.
Yeah, good morning. So our organization has been involved with the NatChoc, your law enforcement agencies, even with the previous case where the Ethiopians were found. So we've been in the interview and the screening process with the Ethiopians coming into the country. I think it's extremely important to distinguish between what is human trafficking and what is human smuggling.
Right.
Because many times we have human smuggling aspects of human trafficking that we see. So in the previous cases where we've seen that the Ethiopians, because obviously there's a strong language barrier between Amharic, so we're looking for translators to interpret exactly what happened to them, how did they come into the country. So many of the conversations that I personally had with the Ethiopians, with translators, they tell us that they hate the smuggler in Kenya. So in case of human trafficking, we are looking at involuntary or forceful recruitment, or sometimes deceptive recruitment. So that part, and many of these Ethiopians would say, no, they willingly paid the smuggler in Kenya. And then from Kenya, they were smuggled then to Malawi, then to Zimbabwe. And these men tell us that they traveled for 3 months. And that traveling to come to South Africa is quite abusive. So we've seen aspects of abuse, where these smugglers, which is a crime, these smugglers are taking their money, they are being exploited in some way. But that is very important for police and crime intelligence to do that screening process quite thoroughly, because are we dealing with smuggling, which is a crime, or are we dealing with trafficking? Because when we ask human trafficking, what type of trafficking happened? Did the exploitation take place, or were these men only held hostage in a home? So was it kidnapping? Was it hostage? Or was it sex trafficking? Was it labor trafficking? Did the exploitation part happen? Were they trafficked into the mines, our illegal mining system? Were they trafficked into spaza shops? Was it their form of agriculture? So what exploitation took place? And that process is very crucial to understand.
Yeah, and perhaps then what we can do is talk about the trends, right? As some of those answers really come to light with authorities doing the work to really answer the questions that you've raised. But I want to look at the trends, right? You talk about smuggling and some of the deplorable conditions that they lived in October last year. I think you might remember the story of Ethiopians who were believed to have been smuggled further south in the continent, found dead in Malawi, 29 bodies that were offloaded off a truck. So in that sort of case, would that have been smuggling? And also, just how on top of it are we in terms of actually getting to the bottom of this? So how often are these cases actually found, Emma?
Yes, so that's a problem. We've seen in Tanzania a lot of cases, and even the Ethiopians that reach South Africa, every time we talk to them, 3 of their fellow community Ethiopians have died along the way. So when we look at smuggling, we see those aspects. A lot of time they're on foot. A lot of time their belongings are stolen. So the Ethiopian community are vulnerable. Firstly, because they are illegal. Secondly, so these predators take advantage. Whether it's trafficking or smuggling, we need to determine that. But there's definitely vulnerabilities. We are also concerned, with our smuggling routes in South Africa, our border control. They tell us they're coming over Messina, but they're walking over the water, the rivers. So, and we're looking at a variety of countries being involved here. We're looking at the smuggler being in Kenya. We're looking at Malawi. We're looking at Zimbabwe. And we're looking at South Africans also being involved in the process. Many of the houses in Centurion, remember the Ethiopians in that house where we were quite closely involved, the house belonged to a South African. So who is involved in the syndication of these cases? And yes, we need to stop it because the Ethiopians are vulnerable.
So much like in this case with these 90 that were found here in Johannesburg over the weekend, it's believed that there was an owner to that property who had moved out, right? So, I mean, what's the concern around, I suppose, where the money trickles down to and some of the trends that you have seen? And particularly where you're talking about communities that are, you know, close-knit. I mean, this is a community that says it has a neighborhood watch. It's surprising to them that these 90 nationals were found in this large suburban home as well.
So firstly, when we look at the criminal patterns, that we need to investigate because it's a pattern with the Ethiopians coming to the country. So there is someone recruiting them from Ethiopia's side. The stories and the challenge with the Ethiopians is because of the conflict within their own country, South Africa do not see them as a refugee country, but we can see aspects of internal conflict in Ethiopia, which are causing them, and poverty, causing them to escape to other countries, also into Europe. They are escaping their own conditions. So when we look at the Human Trafficking Act, we look at those vulnerabilities. When we look at the pattern of the criminal patterns that are forming, we are concerned because they are always in houses, and we're not sure why exactly, because the Ethiopian community stick together. They're quite a knitted community, although they come from, some of them even speak different dialects. Some of them speak Amharic or Moro. So yes, the investigation is to show us why, who is. I do think that there are smugglers exploiting their vulnerabilities, that are taking their money. The men come here, they are crying because they sold their properties in Ethiopia to pay the smuggler to come here.
Yeah.
Also, what is important to understand, a lot of them come with a piece of paper. And on that paper is South African numbers where they will promise jobs. And I think when they come here, they are ended up without money, without food, locked up in a house, probably a hijacked property. And they do not know it because someone promised them and they cannot speak English. So they are stuck in this property with the hope of getting a phone to get to the person that promised them a job. And I think that's when it stops.
Yeah.
And they are without food. And that needs to be investigated.
You know, one thing that we hear quite often about our country is that South Africa is a transit point for human trafficking, and we've heard even drug trafficking at some point, right? That's something that certainly has been said. And I wonder if we're chipping away at that reputation of ours by actually dealing with it. And you've got to look at the numbers here. So 90 people in this one incident. Are we even... I suppose, you know, again, chipping away at the large number of smuggling that may, in fact, be taking place. So essentially, I'm saying, are we, are we getting to the bottom of it as we unveil these big numbers, or are we not even, shaving off a little bit of it? And then also, we've got this brand new government, this new 7th administration. What does the Home Affairs Minister do about all of this?
Yes, definitely. I think we work closely with Home Affairs and Immigration. They've done well in even screening for trafficking, aspects of trafficking, but it's not the, crime intelligence need to screen, SAPs need to screen when they are minors, underage, because some of these men have been under 18, which then we're looking at boys that are smuggled into the country. So yes, our border control is problematic. We have many points of smuggling routes, more than 30 smuggling routes where people are coming into. Human smuggling is happening, and also smuggling of drugs, smuggling of, we have the zamazamas with illegal mining being smuggled out. We're looking at PRASA, Eskom, metal being smuggled, chrome. So we have a large problem. And I think South Africa needs to put a lot of emphasis in controlling our borders to make sure, because children are also becoming victims, children that are smuggled into our country without documentation. It's a massive concern.
Yeah. What happens after these documented Ethiopian nationals are rescued procedurally? What happens to them?
So correct. So if the crime intelligence sees there's no aspects of human trafficking, then we're looking possibility at human smuggling. If they are illegally, because many of the men do have that come to South Africa in like Zimbabweans, like other Malawians coming in the case of Job, but they are illegal, then they need to be handed over to immigration. There are NGOs being involved, the Ethiopian Association, MRI. They are to repatriate them back to Ethiopia. Unfortunately, because of the conditions in the country, they do not want to go back to Ethiopia because they now sold all their property. So we do looking at, is it refugee? Is it not? South Africa at the moment is saying they're not refugees. But yeah, the conditions of these men are not, they're in horrible conditions. And also we don't see females coming over the border. We do see males. There is a concern because there's news saying that in Tanzania, a lot of these Ethiopian men do have military skills. We're raising a question there. In Ethiopia, they do need to go to military training. But I don't think that's a concern as yet. The investigation needs to prove what are we dealing with.
Oh, it certainly is a red flag, though, when we've been covering the story of 95 Libyans in Mpumalanga. I mean, hard to ignore when you mention the word, some of them possibly having military training. And then it begs the question what communities do, right? And is there some power? I mean, if you look at the situation in White River and Mpumalanga, Emma, the community saying, well, they certainly weren't expecting that there was this many people that were part of a possible military camp. They'd seen some of them move through the community. In the instance of these 90 Ethiopians, community members, some of them saying they're completely shocked by what they found in their area. What are the telltale signs that something may be off in a particular community, and can communities do or say anything?
Correct. I think it's very important for communities to whistleblow, to talk when they see certain patterns, because when we're looking at war, when we're looking at terrorism, when we're looking at, and I'm not saying it is that yet, because I don't think we need to alarm, the investigation needs to prove, but we are looking at patterns. A huge amount of Libyans, what are they doing in our country? It's not, the media is saying, and the investigation is showing that it's not necessarily just normal security training. Why military training on South African soil? Are there more camps? I think investigation needs to, there's possible more than only 95. There's possibly of other camps that needs to be investigated quite urgently, because we need to protect we need to protect South Africa, because, the internal conflict, political conflict is playing a role, but we need to be very aware, and I do think we need to have a fast reaction to see what is going. But yes, communities, we are here to safeguard each other as fellow South Africans. We need to whistleblow. We need to talk. We need to fight corruption. Our borders is a problem with corruption on the borders. We need to monitor that and take action.
One thing, it's almost hard to have this conversation without mentioning our grey listing as a country. Do you think that as these stories come to the fore, that it does help in some way to clean up the image? And I'm now speaking about even the economic image of our country as we show that law enforcement at the very least is cracking down.
Correct. I think South Africa, what we don't realize, we have a large informal economy that is busy taking place because of a large influx of illegal immigrants that are coming into the country, people that are not registered, that are just undocumented people, that people give birth, children are not documented. So yes, I do think there is hope. I do think we need to fight as a community. Someone once said to me, an army that does not have a war fights within. So I think the fight is not to fight within with each other, but to fight ahead, so that we can see the threats coming within. I think the enemy was on the outside, but it has infiltrated within, and we need to protect ourselves. But we need to stand together as South Africans to fight a war, because otherwise we will be distracted on the bigger war that is coming from, Africa. South Africa is the third, economically, the third highest on financially strongest country in Africa. And Africa, so we are a target, our economy is a target for people that are vulnerable, with countries that are at war. There's internal conflict in African countries. So we need to be eyes open to see what is our mandate and how do we fight and protect and fight forward. But we need to stand together. I think the community needs to stand together. We all need to work together in one unity to build our country, not just fight the internal struggles all the time, but to build forward.
Yeah. Well, Emma, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, and certainly an eye-opening discussion, particularly when you make the point around what communities can and should be doing as well to assist law enforcement authorities. Emma van der Walt is the CEO and founder of Brave to Love, which is a counter-human trafficking organization, speaking to us this morning. All right.